Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Janina, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends, and welcome back. Now, today's episode, it is unlike anything I've done before, and I'm going to warn you right now, it will stir up emotions. I was left shocked and frustrated and honestly quite sad so many times during this conversation. But more than anything, it completely opened up my eyes to a side of the wine world that most of us never get to see. Today, you're going to discover how common counterfeit wines really are, and whether you could unknowingly come across it, the biggest red flags to look out for, and why provenance is one of the most important yet least understood concepts in the wine world. Joining me is Maureen Downey. She is one of the world's leading authorities on wine fraud and authentication. She has worked alongside the FBI on some of the biggest wine fraud cases in history, including the infamous Rudy Kurniawan case. There are very few people on the planet with Maureen's level of experience, and so I am honoured that she's come on this podcast, and her insights are just both fascinating and then at times deeply unsettling. But make sure you stay to the end, because we will be finishing on a high with Maureen sharing her favourite wines, exciting wine regions, and what brings her joy when sharing a beautiful glass. So pour yourself something special, get comfortable, and, well, let's dive into this fascinating and sometimes darker side of the wine world. Enjoy the episode. Maureen, thank you so much for joining me. I'm very excited to dive into this topic. Are you ready to spill the beans?
I am. I'm ready. Spill the tea, as the kids say.
Of course. Gosh, beans. Honestly, I don't even know what. I shouldn't be a wine communicator or presenter. I can't even get the wording right. So, before you spill the tea, your career, you work in the wine industry, but it is not like anybody else. So, before we get into fraud and authentication, can you take me back to how it started? I mean, was there a wine trip that took you down the rabbit hole of wine?
Oh. That's a good question. Nobody's ever actually asked me that question.
No.
So it's kind of, I'm a very rare creature in this world of wine, because I actually started studying wine at the age of 18.
Okay.
In America. So
deliberately studying?
Yeah.
No one does that.
So I know. Yeah. I took a wine course at the Boston University when I was a freshman in college. And then as a sophomore in college, I studied and I did a semester in Belgium. And we had a wine trip through Burgundy, Champagne, and the Loire. And that was pretty great. And I really, really enjoyed learning about wine. Like, I enjoyed the academic aspect of studying wine. I think it's such an interesting combination of history and geology and culture and art, really. And all those things really go together, I think, so well in such an interesting way. The other, once the kind of academic bug hit me, it just never ended. So when I was a junior in college, but when I was 20 years old, we actually won the Kevin Zraly's Windows on the World wine competition.
Okay.
Boston University. Yeah, we beat Cornell and UNLV and Johnson & Wales, all these other schools that laughed at us.
How fun.
So I think it was, I don't think that it was a particular wine trip. I mean, I did kind of grow up going to Sonoma a lot. Wine was part, as an American, that's a strange thing to say, that in the 70s and 80s, my parents had wine on the table every night. So again, that's somewhat unique in America. So I don't think there was a particular trip that hit me. I think it was more just like a cultural influence.
I love that. But I mean, you worked in restaurants as well, didn't you? So
I have a degree in hospitality.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But when I graduated from college, I had won this competition, right? And I had all these connections, like crazy people. Clive Coates sent us like 4 years of the vine. Like we had really good connections. So I took this course in Napa, that was a week-long course with the master sommeliers. And so that was, when I was 23. And then I did really well in that, and they wanted me to take the advanced MS. So at the age of 24, I took the advanced MS, but I was on crutches because I was...
Is that another story?
Yeah, a little bit of full moon sledding down what became Olympic ski runs with a lot of hot Austrian boys.
It was worth it.
Wiped out my leg.
Come on,
I was 23.
Good for you.
So yeah, the Court of Master Sommeliers moved me to New York when I was 24 to manage Tavern on the Green, and then I managed L'Espinasse and then Felidia. So some of the top restaurants really in the world, not Tavern on the Green, but L'Espinasse for sure and Felidia. And then Fred Dane came back to town and said, hey, great job, but we didn't move you here to manage restaurants. We moved you here for wine. You're taking the advanced again in 3 months. So I decided to take the summer, quote unquote, off and work in a wine store. This is pre-Coravan. So the only way to really do a lot of tasting was working in a wine store and getting a good discount. So I just wanted a chill job for the summer, but they made me the wine store manager and I hated it. So very quickly they moved me into auctions.
Right.
So that's when this all started.
Okay. So you got moved into auctions. What were you doing? I think that side of wine is very cool and aside.
Oh my God, it's so much fun.
Right. So what were you doing?
I have to say, any person out there that really wants to understand fine and rare wine, get a job working in a wine auction house because you get exposure to so many bottles and you see so many things. I mean, the hands-on education is just unbelievable because you're not dealing with a portfolio. You're not dealing with only the things that your store buys. You're dealing with every wine in every region in the world. And when I started this, we didn't really use the computer. So we had to look all the wines up. So I learned the differences between all the Gugal, the Lala vineyards by studying them in books because there was no internet, it was the year 2000. So there was internet, but we didn't use it for work, So what's so interesting about it is that people send in their collections. And at the time it was different because there was a much wider, we were selling Farniente and we were selling wines that would be totally rejected at auction today because they were, $40 Napa Valley Chardonnay and Merlot, which are all now like $150 anyway. But we saw really, really, so it's really interesting. People send their wine in and you put the bottles literally up on tables and you inspect them and you organize them and you put them into lots. Sometimes you do that on paper first, but what people send in is usually not exactly what they said. I always say that the best inventory is 80%. I just helped out my friend Don Cornwell, who sold a significant part of his collection through HDH. And he had the best inventory I'd ever seen. He was probably at about 95%.
Wow, okay.
And that was a standout. So yeah. So it's an interesting job because you put all these bottles up on the table and there are some that you don't know about. You're seeing a German vineyard that you've never seen. You got to go look it up. What is that? Find out about it. But it's a great way to learn, and it's visual and then you go learn about it and then you own it, So in the process of doing that, I started finding counterfeit bottles and I'm like, what? This is a thing, WTF on that.
Uh-huh.
And so that kind of started this whole craziness.
Right. And for anybody who is listening now, I just need to put out there, you are most definitely, or arguably in my eyes, you are the leading authority on counterfeit wine. So, I guess because I imagine once you see it, you can't unsee it when we talk about counterfeit wines. So, what was the biggest learning about counterfeit wines at the beginning when you started holding some of these bottles just to begin with?
I think that honestly, the thing that hit me over the head was that there was counterfeit wine. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know about this. So there was one, I've told this story before, but there was one day where, again, the warehouse guys put all these bottles up on a table, and then you go back and you organize them. So depending on what it is, you're organizing it by producer, by region, by whatever. And there was a bottle I could see of Petrus way in the back of the table. So I reached in the back and grabbed it. And you have certain muscle memory when you're touching bottles all day. You know the feel of an Alsatian bottle against a Burgundy bottle, against a Bordeaux bottle, against like one of these Colt California man killers, like, is that a Magnum or a 750, right? They're so heavy. But you have this muscle memory of of the expectation. I grabbed this bottle of Petrus and I lifted it like it was going to be a normal bottle. And I almost threw the thing. It almost fell out, launched out of my hand.
It was so light.
It was so light. And then I looked at it and the glass was a little bit blue. And this is, so it was like it was a late 70s, early 80s alleged bottle. But it was in this like blue glass that you used to see from like Chile, and I was like, so I took it in to the guy that ran the auction division, Nikos, and I'm like, Nikos, what is this? And he's, oh yes, there is counterfeit wine. He's great character. And I was like, what? Like that was shocking to me. And then there was this one time where this crazy man was asking all these questions about some 1945 Gruau de la Rose magnums that we had on auction. So I had to go out and look at all these weird details, like what are the dimensions of the label and what are the markings in the punt and how is the alcohol displayed? Like, is it, 12.5? Is it 12.5? Is it 12% by volume or is it just 12%? You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, what a weirdo this guy is. And then and so I answered all the questions, it's like filling out a questionnaire almost. Gave it to my boss and he faxed it to this guy. And then the next day I got there and there was another set of questions from a guy and he wanted photographs. And I'm like, this dude's a freaker. So, but I'm like, why would he be asking me all these weird little questions? What direction does the paper grain? Does the paper have ridges? In what direction are they horizontal or are they vertical? So, I'm taking pictures of these bottles and Peter Morel walks in and he was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm taking pictures for this weird German guy that wants to know all these details. And he was like, well, what is his name? And I look at the paper and I'm like, Hardy Rodenstock. And Peter goes, oh, well, they say he counterfeits wine. And that was total light bulb moment. I was like, I'm authenticating bottles for him. Oh. So maybe he had made counterfeits of those bottles. Or he knew there were counterfeits of those bottles. And these are all the details that he wanted to look at to make sure that the bottles that he was buying were authentic. So then I started reading about him and I started learning about him and I started learning that like, this is really a thing. But I was working at Morel & Company. And so it wasn't, because auctions only became legal in New York in 1996. They started in 98. So I was there in 2000. So I was there it was a very nascent industry. Right. So we didn't have this like established master of wine running the program. I was some like 26-year-old kid in charge. Right. So I didn't have anybody really to teach. And I was so fascinated that this could happen. And I think I often say there was like the Sister Catherine, the little nun on my shoulder being like, oh, this is terrible. How could somebody counterfeit? Oh, little Irish brogue speaking in my ear about how ethically wrong this was. And it also like hurt my soul that this beautiful thing could be happening, So I used the resources that I had, which were, I reached out to friends to talk to people at museums about paper and, my cousins are glassblowers that worked with Chihuly. And so they taught me everything about the history of glass. And, I went to printing presses and I learned about print. So I just kind of learned all this stuff and I started putting it to use. And then I started finding more and more counterfeits. And then my group of friends started getting involved on both sides.
Interesting. So for listeners who love wine, but they don't tend to buy rare wines, how common is counterfeit wine really in your experience?
Google. The UK is awash in counterfeit yellowtail.
What? So
yep.
And why? What? Why?
Yep. Yeah. Well, because you either, a counterfeiter is either going to make a couple hundreds or a lot of ones, right? So there is an organized crime syndicate that is a combination of Eastern Europe and China that have been flooding the UK with counterfeit yellowtail for years. And I think this is really interesting because, they mostly were hitting like pubs. It's kind of like somebody's got a van and they pull up and they're like, hey, the guy down the road was supposed to buy this, but he reneged and, I can't go back to the warehouse with this. This is a good deal. Will you take it off my hands? Right? I mean, they've literally arrested people with like vans full of counterfeit yellowtail. And the interesting thing about that to me is I think somebody who goes to a pub and has a glass of yellowtail every day is in a better place to recognize a counterfeit than somebody who's drinking a 45 Mouton. Because if you're drinking Coca-Cola every day and somebody gives you a Pepsi, you're going to notice the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has 45 Mouton with such regularity that they can be like, oh, this is counterfeit. Rah. You know what I mean? So what I think is really interesting is that it's the counterfeits on the lower end get called out by actual consumers.
Wow.
More than the fine and rare counterfeits.
I'm blown away. I'm like, how do I not know about this? I was literally going to ask you, how often do you think an average person would come across this? Way more than we might think. Okay.
Yeah.
Apart from your everyday yellowtail, what have you found is mostly faked? Is it the First Growth Bordeaux? Is it?
Well, I think that you have to bifurcate the question because you have to look at two different markets. You have to look at the fine and rare market separate from like the commercial supermarket market, because the commercial supermarket market is where you're getting a lot of counterfeits. There's a lot. If you go into a random, grocery store in Europe and you pick up a Chateauneuf de Pape, the largest bottler in the Côte d'Aron, which is the largest producing region in the world, for 3 years counterfeited as much as 1/3 of his own bottling by making Côte d'Aron Village into Chateauneuf de Pape or Vaqueras. So that's going to be the supermarket side, right? And that's happening like at the producer level. And you've got all the Spanish rosé that gets shipped over and ends up in the south of France, right? So that's the supermarket side. And that's a really big part of fraud. And I think that brings the numbers up. But what I always say to people is that I think it's really important that people recognize that that's an aspect of fraud. And obviously in the West, we aren't dealing also with the crazy like Chinese IP infringement, where it's Popus 1 instead of Opus 1 and Pack Whores instead of Petrus. And, we could laugh at that, but if there was a Chinese product, I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
If it looks close, I wouldn't know if the house, if the character is supposed to be at a certain angle and it's at a wide angle, they would laugh at that. I would never know it because I'm an idiot, because I don't read Chinese or Cyrillic. So
of course.
Anyway, so that I think is one type of fraud. The other type of fraud is this kind of mass market, supermarket, the yellowtail fraud, which again, Google, the UK is awash in counterfeit yellowtail. Fascinating. It's been going on for years. And then you have the fine and rare fraud.
Yeah.
And the fine and rare fraud is where they either are recreating a bottle that existed by getting different pieces. That's what the famous counterfeiters, Rudy Kurniawan and Hardy Rodenstock did. But there are also things that are a lot more common, like refilling a bottle or relabeling a bottle. I've got a lot of instances where, you pull I have a great story about this, but you'll pull a cork and the label is a certain vintage that might be 2 times what a lesser vintage would be. And then the cork is the lesser vintage. I actually had a situation where one of my absolute favorite vendors in the world, this guy's a really good friend of mine. He was at my wedding and he took me out to dinner to thank me because my clients buy millions and millions and millions from him every year. So one of my absolute favorite vendors in the world, one of the top 3 vendors that I trust, we've inspected so many millions of dollars in product from them. And he brought one of my favorite producers, J.F. Mugnier, bottle of Musigny, and it was supposed to be, from one of my favorite vintages. And we were all excited and they pulled the cork and the cork was a different vintage than the bottle that he brought. So this is not something that only happens to, like, it's not, I think the fraud has become so pervasive that even good vendors get stung. People can be as careful as possible and it still happens. So, but that's one of the types of fraud, or then there's refilling a bottle. But, I got to say, I am, an authority on counterfeiting, but I'm also an authority on fraud. And I think one of the biggest issues about fraud right now is theft, because a lot of people have realized that it's easier to steal it than it is to make it. So that's a huge thing that's going on globally. I mean, you read about it, at least once a month, there's a big story about a restaurant or a wine store or a hotel that got broken into, right? And the problem with all of this goes back to the fact that the supply chains for wines and spirits are of the most opaque in the world. Everyone is so secretive. And there are so many people who are selling fine and rare wine that have no effing business doing it. Just because you are a sommelier and you had a stellar Sauvignon Blanc by the glass program does not mean that you are qualified to immediately sell 1945 Mouton, So, and everybody is so secretive about the supply that they get, and it's from a friend of a friend, but I really trust this guy. I don't trust anybody. I want to verify. That's why we've got this international team of authenticators that literally spans the globe so that we can help collectors and vendors. We do help a lot of vendors who want to make sure that they're selling, representing, and drinking the right thing.
See, now, of course, that's where you come in to check the authenticity of the product. But what about theft? What can you do? At the end of the day, if it's a real authentic bottle, but it was stolen and they're selling it somewhere else, is there anything is there some sort of process to try and track that? There is.
So that's what I've created. So obviously this is a big problem. And after screaming about it for 20 years, I finally decided it was time to come up with a solution. So we have an online blockchain solution called the Shea Vault, whereby bottles can be registered either at the time of production by an importer or like the first
at the beginning,
like the first step, either the importer or the distributor, or they can be, or even actually if it's a first retailer, they have proof of provenance. They would be able to put it in the Shea Vault before it ever gets to a first owner, basically. So before the car is driven off the lot, if it gets certified, then we can carry, and then if they sell that, there's a little online link, a little URL that somebody, a button that somebody can hit that takes them to a URL that shows the provenance of that bottle. So that can either, if we go from the beginning, from the producer on, and that bottle will be worth more. And if people have bottles that are stolen, they can register those in the system as stolen. And if somebody ever scans them, we can be like, hey, that's a stolen bottle.
So that works, but presumably this is still new and only accounts for the tiniest amount of wine so far.
Yeah.
So this is something that can only grow and get better.
I mean, correct. It's something, but I can't go back from where we are right now, but I can go back by having my authenticators input bottles, from today. But having a blockchain registry is the only thing that's going to work. And, I got to say, so at my wedding rehearsal dinner, I had a brand new, super cute Louis Vuitton bag with my favorite charm. And the wedding planner put it on top of a table and we were outside. Somebody grabbed it.
Ugh.
Yeah, I was pretty pissed. So I went into Louis Vuitton the next day and I'm like, hey, I just bought this bag. I know that you guys chip your bags. Can you register that bag as stolen? And he was like, no, we don't have any way of doing that. And I'm like, what? I have a way of doing that. So, I think this is right. I think this is something that could happen because what if they go to sell that on the Real or, eBay Authenticate or something?
Mm-hmm.
This should be something where people can see the provenance of a bottle because the problem right now is that fraud is so easy to perpetrate, whether it's, a recreation bottle, a refill, a complete counterfeit, a stolen bottle, whatever it is, it's really easy to fence because there is no way of tracking bottles. The other problem with that is that producers really have no idea where their bottles go.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a real weakness and it's a supply chain issue. If the producers, the 2023 Burgundies are hitting the United States right now and people that bought them directly from the producers, those producers work really hard on making sure that their allocations are set correctly, right? And there are a lot of people that are profiteers and they buy the bottles and they immediately flip them for a huge profit, a much larger profit than the domains are making, right? If I was a producer, I'd want to know who is actually drinking my wine versus who is profiting from my wine. So having a registry of bottles, it helps in so many ways. If the producers can see, person X in San Francisco, has 1,000 of my bottles, or they have a vertical and they're missing 2 vintages. I could directly contact them and say, hey, I see that you're missing these 2 vintages to complete a vertical. I would like to offer you a special library offering. So there's so many things that we can do about it, more than fighting fraud. But the fraud thing is certainly on the top of my mind. And it's not getting better. So what we're seeing now, there's this one guy, Alexander Lugov, and there's going to be a huge article coming out about him in The Economist, their long form magazine. The brilliant journalist who's been working on it for over a year. But this Lugov guy got arrested in 2019 for counterfeiting certain Burgundy. And I have some of his bottles and they look really good until you use like our forensics, right? Because we use microscopes, we use different types of light. We look for certain things. And in the wake of the Kurniawan and also the Hardy Rodenstock frauds. So Hardy Rodenstock did a lot of his counterfeits in the 80s and early 90s. And Rudy Kurniawan, was really 2001 until he got arrested in 2012. In the aftermath of that, one of the main things that changed was the producers adopted a lot of cosmetic solutions to try to protect their bottles. And these include markings on paper, invisible markings, holograms, micro writing, putting holograms actually into the paper. And all of those things are great, except all they do is substantiate counterfeit refills, right? And that's a problem. But it does still help us. So, the Lugov bottles didn't have that invisible ink that we would look for on the producers that he was counterfeiting. So those were easy to spot. And actually, Ronan Sabern was out in California with me a few years ago, and we opened one. And oh my God, they were just disgusting. This Lugov bottle. I mean, they tasted like absolute hot crap. And he was selling them in Switzerland. So then he got 2 years and he had to pay 150,000 euro fine. Not much for making 30,000 euro bottles, right? So he got out and he just got more sophisticated. So it's probably Russian organized crime. So 2.5 years ago, he and 6 accomplices, like from Belgium, Northern Italy, Russia, were arrested again. And what they had done is they were well funded and they had a professional digital printer of the same caliber and quality that is used by producers, by label makers. So the counterfeits are getting more sophisticated. So we have to get more sophisticated. But I also think that the best way to go about it is actually by tackling supply chain opacity.
Yeah, no, but which will take time. But then once it's in place, it's going to make things a lot easier. Gosh,
right.
I feel so angry. I feel so angry listening to you. But thank God there's someone like yourself fighting the good fight for us. So, okay. Without, I guess, giving away all the trade secrets, you have mentioned a few things using forensic, now this invisible wording on the bottles. But when you are authenticating a bottle, are you able to talk about maybe the main few things to begin with that you look for that maybe you haven't already mentioned?
1,000%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we do have, first of all, we have a massive database. And again, I have a team on shakeconsulting.com. My whole team is on there and we are, we cover the globe. We have a massive database. So we do have authentic bottles, known authentic bottles that we can compare. But we do look at things like the measurements, a label, the cuts of a vintage tag, the colors of the ink, how the ink was put on the paper. And like this Lugov guy, he did use invisible ink, but the quality of his print was just a little bit off. And so his invisible ink is just a little bit not right. It's not to the level. So, we look at the quality, we look at the paper itself, the paper grain. For old and rare bottles, we look for things like false aging. Where the bottle, like when you see like an oxidation mark and there's like a right angle, they counterfeiters bake labels in the oven. And if they've got one on top of another, they can actually imprint on each other, and there'll be a little bit of a ghost of the other label that you can see. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy things. Siobhan Turner, who's a master of wine, who is one of my top authenticators, she always smells the old labels, because if they smell like tobacco or tea, then they might have been aged in some sort of slurry to make them look more yellow. So there's a lot of different, we look for glue in cuts and tears because, you know, if you think logically, at the time that the label is put onto the bottle, it's not immediately nicked. And if the label were nicked, the producers take a lot of pride in their wines, right? They're not going to send a ripped label out to the market. They're going to take that label off and redo it. So the glue should have been dry. So if there's a nick or a tear, that was probably purpose made, and then the glue put on, and then they stick it on the label, so the glue kind of seeps out a little bit. So there's all sorts of, and then, I mean, the older the wine, the more fun it is, because you get into the way things react differently to UV lights. Do they glow? Do they have no reaction? Because there shouldn't be a reaction to a UV light prior to really the 1960s. So there's all sorts of fun stuff that we get to look at.
My God, honestly, you're just saying all these things. I'm like, wow, there's a lot for me to absorb. I'm already thinking, I'm going to re-listen to this a few times to to remember.
We know it's so fun because we have to study history. We have to know production, but then we also get to do all the Inspector Gadget stuff, you know? So it's a little bit of, you know, investigative. It's a little bit of, you know, crime fighting. It's a little bit of, you know, and really, I think the most important thing that I have is the team.
Well,
because we reach out to each other and we're like, oh, and when there are stolen wines, by the way, that we find out about, we tell our own network and we reach out to our people and we say, hey, you know, we know that this is a lot of wine that's missing, but those wines are usually sold to private people before they're even stolen.
I'm like, I just didn't realize that you guys are basically wine detectives. So cool. That is, I'm a little flabbergasted. I mean, as we talk about crime and you being the detective and solving these crimes, has there ever been a bottle that initially like completely fooled you?
Oh, there've been plenty. And I think that's why I like working in a team, because the way that we work now is we work in groups. And if one team finds a problem with the bottle, they will not tell the other team what their issue was. They'll just give the bottles to the other team, typically, hopefully without the other team realizing that. And then if they red flag it, you know, now we've got independence and we all come back together and we talk about it, because we're stronger in teams. Now, a lot of times we do have to work alone, and there, you know, you have to rely on your knowledge and your experience and the database. But we often talk to each other after an authentication and say, hey, these are the things that I noticed. Or, you know, here's this bottle. Here are my concerns. You know, what do you think? So there are definitely bottles that at first glance, I was like, oh, I think that's okay. And then one of my authenticators would have been like, did you notice this? And then I'll be like, oh my God, I didn't. Good catch. When you're working alone, you usually, like they think I'm kind of crazy, but I'll sit there and just look at a bottle and just like take it in for a few minutes. It's kind of like, imagine looking at a piece of you go to a museum and you see like an amazing piece of art. Like the first thing that you do is you step back and you take the whole thing in before you start focusing in on the details, right? And when I do that, sometimes the details that stand out to me are the things that are wrong. So, but sometimes if I'm not careful enough, if I am working with a bunch of people, I might miss one of those details. And that's why I think it's really good for us to work in teams, because somebody else might catch that. But, a lot of people ask me, what's the best counterfeit that you've ever seen?
Yeah.
It's probably the one. It's the one that I didn't get.
Okay, I suppose.
I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm totally perfect. And there are some bottles that unfortunately, the producers are so lax that there's really nothing we can do. All that we can say is, I don't find problem with this bottle. I wouldn't suggest selling it, but drink it.
So if we can't discuss the most sophisticated fake that you've seen, because you wouldn't know.
The most sophisticated fakes are by far Alexander Lugo.
Okay. Fine.
By far, because he's got $1 million printer. He's got a printer that's just as good as the stuff that the people that are making these labels professionally in Burgundy for the Burgundians are using.
Wow. Okay.
And they have anti-fraud and they have all this stuff. And the problem is the producers are so secretive about the counterfeit measures, that they're cosmetic counterfeit measures, that they don't even let people, they don't even let us know sometimes. So how are consumers supposed to use these things to protect themselves?
Yeah.
What are they going to take a bottle back to a chateau in Bordeaux and be like, hey, this is the bottle I got for my birthday. Will you authenticate it for me? Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Well, talking of ridiculous, I love it. You've just we can segue into what's been the funniest, almost ridiculous attempt at a counterfeit wine that you've encountered.
oh my God. So during COVID, I inspected this case of wine, and it was a case of Bordeaux, allegedly. I've actually had this happen twice where I allegedly had a case of Bordeaux. And within the case, there were 6 different bottles. Some of the bottles were like blue. You know, I mean, there are certain things like brown glass doesn't happen in Bordeaux. It's green glass. You know, the size has to be embossed on the glass as part of the bottle. But so this one case, they were different sizes, they were different shapes, they were different heights. I mean, it was the most ridiculous attempt. It was clearly a Rudy Kurniawan early. There are 3 stages of Rudy. There's early Rudy, mid Rudy, and late Rudy. These were early Rudy. But the fact that a vendor and it was Souterage, they're now out of business.
Thank God.
The fact that although the guy that actually sold the bottles is still in business, he worked for Souterage and now he's got a thriving business in Napa, you know, selling to wealthy people. The fact that anybody would look at this case of wine and say, that's okay. Amazing. Amazing. You'd have to be a blind man to think that was okay.
I can't believe that you're telling me that Rudy had these different stages as he became more sophisticated. Because from everything I knew, I mean, he was actually an incredible, horrible human, evil human, but an incredible taster and was able to... No?
Yeah, people blown that up. There's a couple myths. So I said earlier that, you know, this is my group of friends that actually got involved. I was friends with Rudy. I was friends with John Capon. We were all friends in this brand new auction industry in New York. John Capon was my first friend in New York that wasn't a colleague or a sorority sister. And the fact that these guys turned so evil, like, floored me because these were my friends. So Rudy, there's a lot of myths about Rudy. He was a good taster, but he often knew he was tasting his own shit, right? So yeah, he's going to be a good taster. He made the bottle. He would show up late to tastings when everybody else was cocked. You know, they were 10 bottles in. And he would order the bottles that he knew that he had made that the restaurant had bought from his auction. So a lot has been made about him. Was he a good taster? Yeah. Was he some fucking savant? No. Excuse my French. There's so many lies. Rudy was not buying $1 million of wine a month. The only person that ever said that was Rudy. That didn't happen. I was working in the wine auction industry. Rudy would bid on $1 million of wine a month and he would default on 750,000 of it. He wouldn't pay his bills. So he made the appearance that he was buying a million. The only person that ever said that was Rudy. And some journalist in LA quoted him on it. And then she made it her quote. And she said that Rudy was buying $1 million of wine a month. He wasn't. Like, there's so many false stories out there. So many people want to have been involved in this in the beginning and they weren't. And they're making up crazy stories about it to try to make themselves important. It's really frustrating. For somebody like me, I spent 10 years in the trenches, getting physically assaulted, getting maligned online, you know, being cut out of tasting groups and events because I was basically pissing on the boys' campfire.
Shocking.
Like, I was in the trenches. It was hard. It was a really hard 10 years until he got arrested because I was out there calling him out publicly. And calling John Capon out publicly.
Oh my God, you knew for that long as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I was vocal.
He sounds to me like he really isn't that smart. If, even at the beginning, how can you make a case?
He was trained.
Well, okay.
And he was funded.
Wow.
And he was funded. If you go on winefraud.com.
Right.
So he had the largest auction in history at the time. It was like $34 million. So how does this 27-year-old kid come up with $34 million worth of wine? Why did nobody ask him where he got it? Because he started bidding on wine in 2000, 2001. How did he come up with all that wine? If you look at the Acker Merrill Condit post-sale report, which is a piece of government evidence that we have posted on winefraud.com, you can see all of the big collectors that loaned him $1 million. You know, person, and it's by name. Person XYZ, loan, $1 million. Person XYZ, loan, $1 million. Why were these people loaning him $1 million through a wine auction house and then buying wine at the auction, paying a 30% markup? Why not just give Rudy $1 million to get some wine? What's going on there? So at the end of Rudy's $34 million sale, the largest sale in history, he owed Akermerl Condit $50,000. So this was not Rudy alone. Rudy was trained. Rudy was funded. Rudy was supported. You know, a lot of Burgundy producers have some very strong opinions about who taught Rudy, because he didn't go from drinking $40 Napa Merlot to, you know, being the most experienced palate on Bordeaux from the 50s and Burgundy from the 30s and 40s in literally 2 years by himself. Didn't happen.
You're stumping me. I mean, with all this, there's a lot for me to process. I mean, what did that experience of following Rudy's journey and everything he did and understanding this ring that he's part of and the funding that's coming, I mean, what did that teach you about people and, I guess, psychology rather than the wine itself?
Like, it crushed my soul. I mean, it kind of destroyed although I have to say, it has not destroyed my faith in humanity. I still inherently trust people. And a lot of people on my team don't understand that. Like, they legit don't understand that. One of the guys on our team works for Ernst & Young. He actually manages the voting for Eurovision.
Okay.
He's in charge of all of that. Yeah. And he's like, how do you still trust people? He's a forensic accountant. So, I mean, he's seen it all. But what it taught me is that fraudsters are charming, and there's an evilness to them because they will steal from their friends. And it's a bizarre, you know what else it has taught me? People often ask me, like, what do you think Rudy was thinking? I think one of the things that it has taught me is that there are different types of people. We are not all the same. And you can't, like, I can't put myself into the mind of somebody that would think it would be okay to, for example, steal from their friends or rape a child. I can't put myself in that. My brain doesn't work that way. I think their brains are wired differently. Somebody who could do that is, there's evil in the world. So, but the one thing is, you know, you can say, oh my God, I want to cry about this. I have taken the approach that I have to laugh. I have to keep lighthearted about it, and I have to laugh about it because, you know, in the end of the day, the best thing to do is go and have an absolutely gorgeous glass of wine and remember why I fight this, because it's beautiful. It's history, it's art, it's culture, and it's delicious and it's fun.
And wine is joy, and it should bring us that. So considering that people are listening and they might be like, oh my God, I'm feeling a little shocked, emotional right now. I buy an auction, la la la. They might be, you know, their head is spinning. You've already talked, I think, actually, about a lot of red flags. Everything that you're looking for, I think that's really useful. People can maybe pay attention. They can look at the bottle themselves, at least a little bit on labels and things like that. Do a little bit of research on the vintage. Look at online what it should look like. So there's definitely, you've given us some advice. But is there anything else that somebody should maybe keep in mind if they are buying at auction, browsing a wine list? Do you have?
It's not just auction. It's not. One of the most important things here is that it's not just auction. A lot of auction houses, not all, but a lot of auction houses have cleaned up their at least they're trying. Some of them. You know, I inherently trust Hart Davis Hart. I think they're fantastic. I inherently trust K&L in the United States. So I think a couple things that are really important are, don't just trust. When people say, there are a lot of times, because I mean, I get major offers, right? My main job is to manage private wine collections. So I manage multi-million-dollar, like, you know, and like 40,000 bottle collections, you know, 40,000 bottle, $40 million over here. Like, I manage a lot of very large collections. I get the offers in. And, you know, oh, here's a parcel for $300,000, or here's a special bottle. And I ask the question. I say, okay, what's the provenance? Oh, well, you know, we got it from this guy that we've been buying from a really long time and we trust him. And I said, that's great. I don't trust him. Where did he get it? I want provenance. And I'm telling you, several times a year, the vendors that I really like will come back to me and they say, you know what? We asked the guy and he said he was actually selling it for a friend. So we're not going to represent it. So ask the questions and demand answers. And if people won't give you those answers, if their answer is just, oh, well, I trust this guy, walk away. There are plenty of other places to get good wine. So if the price is low, it's low for a reason. It's either a damaged bottle, it's a stolen bottle, or it's a counterfeit bottle. Walk away. The other major thing to do, contact us. We're here. We're all over the world. We are here to help. You know, if you're going to buy a bottle of wine for several $1,000s or a lot, or, you know, or you've got questions about purchasing, contact us, because we are legitimately here to help. I started Shea Consulting to work on behalf of the collector and the consumer instead of the auction house, because I recognize that a lot of consumers and collectors just needed some qualified advice. So we're here to help.
Everyone,
reach out.
Information is in the show notes. And I think you have hit on a really important thing, which is that word provenance. I was discussing this. Anybody who's missed episode 270, I was talking about provenance with Hallgarten. They've started the Cellar series where they are buying direct from Chateau, and they were talking all about it. And this is where, if you can find, wherever you are in the world, a importer, distributor, as you said,
Yes.
who is able to say, any bottle of wine that you get, we got it from the Chateau, we followed
Yes.
it through. Provenance is everything with these wines. So that's...
And sometimes those wines are a little bit more expensive. A lot of times they're cheaper. It's hard to get on those lists, but a lot of times they're cheaper. But even if it's a little bit more, to pay for provenance is so worth it, because buying out of condition, wine that's been traded a million times or wine that's counterfeit it's a complete loss.
Yeah.
So,
there's no joy.
Be careful, be vigilant. There's no joy.
There's no joy.
I mean, how sad is that you bought this special bottle and you've got this great event and you've got your closest friends around and you're all so excited to taste this wine and it's crap.
Do you know what? Talking of joy, you have opened up our eyes to a lot of the other side of the world. I think we need to finish this episode with something beautiful. You've tasted and handled some of the world's greatest wines. So I want to know what wines genuinely excite you.
So I have to admit that I am a strong Burgundy girl.
Okay.
Although I'm really liking Chardonnay from the Jura.
Interesting. Okay. Yes. I'm glad.
Really, really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And, at my wedding, well, I mean, obviously I'm a fanatic for Krug. And I like non-dosage champagne. We drank Krug all week because my wedding was like a week long in Verona.
What a beautiful
So
choice.
Shout out to Olivia. Yeah, it was so much fun. I mean, we got many cases of Krug and just drank them all week. But the things that bring me joy, I think, are really good champagne, great Burgundy. I love J.F. Mugnier. I love Hubert Lamy. I love Paul Pilot. We drank a lot of Lamy. But the other thing that I'm really excited about right now, and I kind of feel like I shouldn't say this because
you're going to spike the prices.
Too many people know about it already. I know. But I am really enjoying the wines from Rudy.
Okay.
And Saint Aubin.
Good value Chardonnays.
We had they're not so good value anymore. I mean, a lot of these are $150, $200 a bottle, but for $200 a bottle, you're getting amazing stuff. So again, at my wedding, we drank a lot of Hubert Lamy and the AP de Villaine.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The Ruiz and the Saint Aubin. I mean, just amazing wines. So I think the fun thing is, despite the fact that I just got a case of J.F. Mugnier that I'm really excited about, there are also, I think there are some of these other regions that are coming up that are being propped up by the fact that big Burgundy is so expensive. And the thing that brings me real joy is that you don't have to spend $1,000 to get an absolutely amazing bottle of wine. Bodega's Chacra from Argentina. Holy crap. What good stuff. So there are some really exciting, I think, wine projects from all over the world that we can get excited about. So I want to ensure everybody that I spend a lot of time actually learning new wines and exploring, new stuff. And I'm not totally entrenched in the sad, the frustrating, and the maddening.
So, few last questions then. What's the most underrated? Let's ignore that. We know the Burgundies, the Bordeaux, the Barolos. What's the most underrated wine region for you right now?
The Côte Chalonnaise.
Okay. What is the last bottle that genuinely surprised you?
So there's a Nuit Saint George from J.F. Mugnier that I had never seen in America. And I had it in Paris and a few weeks ago, and that was just shockingly good. That's the case that I just got.
Okay, I need to try this, producer. He has been shouted out way too many times on this podcast. Right, okay, I'm going to go and hunt him
do
down.
me a favor and edit all of that out so that nobody knows to go look for these wines.
Nope, sorry, no can do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that was one, but the other one are just the Tissot wines from the Jura. Like I'm continuously blown away by those wines.
And what shall be the last question? What wine would people be shocked to find in your fridge?
I really honestly can't think of anything that would shock you, because I'm going to admit I don't drink wine every day, and when I drink wine, I drink nice wine.
Beautiful.
So, like my house, my favorite go-to every day is Hourglass Sauvignon Blanc. That blows me away.
So, okay,
every day.
Finally, what is one experience or one wine moment, maybe around the world, that every serious wine lover should have at least once? What do we need to do?
Eat and drink in Piedmont.
Okay, done. Exclamation mark.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah, the producers there are just Piedmont is very heavily influenced by the French. So they've got this, like, they're almost more French than the like Southern Italian. They don't have any of that like Italian macho thing. And the food is amazing. And they're all characters. They're hilarious people. And it's just beautiful.
Here.
Piedmont.
Thank you so much for sharing, my gosh, your story, what you do. You're a wine warrior, the best wine detective. Thank goodness for you. I salute you.
Thank you. And my team.
And
I couldn't do it without my team.
And your team. Well, what a reminder that behind every great bottle is a story. It's just that sometimes, unfortunately, not the story we think it is. I hope, though, this episode has given you a whole new appreciation for provenance and some practical tips to help you buy wine with confidence. If you have any thoughts, I'm genuinely love to hear from you. You know my email address is in the show notes, and along with links to Maureen's website and her excellent resources if you'd like to learn more about wine fraud and authentication. Now, next week, we're heading to Oregon as I'm joined by Samantha Cole Johnson, a Master of Wine student, wine educator, wine writer for Jancis Robinson. We're going to be exploring the cross-border AVAs of Oregon and Washington. Do they really matter? And touching on an AVA that is defined by a single remarkable soil type. We're going to be looking at Oregon Pinot Gris and comparing it to Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigios around the world, and talking about a brand new wine category from Oregon that most wine lovers have not heard about. But as always, I leave you with a quote, and this one rather fitting after today's conversation, though not actually about wine. But Ronald Reagan famously said, "Trust but verify." If you are enjoying the podcast and you are getting value from these conversations, I will be so grateful if you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts, give a rating on Spotify or wherever you love listening to your podcast. And if you know another wine lover who'd enjoy these episodes, please share it with them, as this makes a huge difference and helps the podcast continue to grow. Whatever this week has in store for you, I hope you find an opportunity to discover a new wine with provenance, learn something unexpected, and share a great bottle with people you love. Until next week, wine friends, cheers to you.